You do better than BC2. What's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is Unsung Season 11, and this episode is about Switch. Let me go on and say I'm so happy that they did an episode dedicated to this group because I'm a huge fan of Switch. I love their music. They were also an inspiration to me as well. I mean, especially Bobby DeBarge because I love his voice. And so pretty much this was a good episode, and there was a lot that was revealed that I didn't know about the group, but also pretty much we also learned like what was it that broke Switch apart. And the crazy thing about it, it was actually them. You know, it wasn't that they weren't good enough or the fact that they just didn't click. It was the fact that they weren't clicking amongst each other, and that was the tragedy of Switch. And other tragedies propelled afterwards. But the group consisted of Gregory Williams, Bobby DeBarge, his brother Tommy DeBarge, Philip Ingram, the brother of James Ingram, Eddie Llewellyn, and Jody Sims. You know, great talented men, and the reason why they were called Switch is because they had this unique ability to switch instruments as well as voice. So one would be singing lead, and you know, then he'll go to play the drums, and then another guy would go sing lead. You know, it's just like they just had this interplay of musicality, you know, as far as the instruments and the voice, and it was magic. And that's one thing that set them apart from everybody else. Pretty much they were pretty much referred to as like the total package. DeBarge, you know, pretty much said that if you really want to tell the person you love something, play a Switch album, play a Switch record, and let my brother Bobby say it for you. So I thought that was really cool. And another person that also commented, one of the commentators on this episode was Bobby's sister, Bunny DeBarge. And also, pretty much they said that they were like the new version of the Jackson 5, but they pretty much had, you know, that type of it factor. But then pretty much drugs got into play, and a lot of people's lives were destroyed, especially the lives of Bobby and Tommy DeBarge. And pretty much what they were was that they were pretty much a funk / R&B kind of group, because they had a funk edge, but then they had the best R&B ballads. And to this day, you know, these ballads, you know, you can still hear, you know, if you go to like a club or if you listen to like you know, late night radio, you'll hear a Switch song. You'll probably hear I Want to Be Closer, or I Call Your Name, which is actually one of my favorite songs. I love I Call Your Name. That's my jam. And like the two main singers in the group were Philip Ingram and Bobby DeBarge. But Bobby DeBarge had that hidden ingredient, which was his falsetto. I mean, Bobby's falsetto was phenomenal. Okay. Now, pretty much the group started in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Greg was the founder, and he also plays trumpet. He actually joined this group called the Sounds of Soul, which was a gospel group, and that's where he met Bobby DeBarge, who was the eldest of the DeBarge children. And you know, he came from a musical family. He said that there wasn't a DeBarge that didn't sing, and that they pretty much had an innate they had an innate ability to perform. You know, they weren't, you know, classically trained. They were never, you know, trained. They learned by ear. But also we learned that, I mean, especially we saw the DeBarge episode that aired like in season 1, that, you know, music was like their safe haven because they had so much trauma, abuse, and and neglect that went on in their household. Their father, and pretty much Greg has said that Bobby was abused physically, emotionally, sexually, any kind of abuse you can think of. Bobby went through it, and then he also said that he felt that Edeline was very naive as to, how to get away from this negative environment, because it actually destroyed, it actually had a bad effect on all of the DeBarge children. And it left scars that are still present to this day. And we also learned that Bobby DeBarge was actually bisexual, but his sexuality is something he battled with because he was sexually abused by his father. So, he had actually told Greg that, look, I like men and I like women. And he said, and Greg was like, look, I judge you for who you are as a person. It's not about who you sleep with. So I'm cool with you. It is what it is. And pretty much in 1973, Greg, along with Bobby, they ended up signing a deal with Barry White, and they were part of this group called White Heat. They only produced one album and went nowhere, and I think Barry White, ended up, dismantling his Love Unlimited sub-label. So back to Grand Rapids, Bobby went, and I think Greg went to Akron, Ohio, and he went there. I think also Jody Sims was with them when they were a part of White Heat as well. And him and Jody, pretty much, decided to strike it big. So they decided to hey, we're gonna go back to LA, and we're gonna find out. We're gonna make our own way. We're gonna find our own record deal. And so happened, let's just say destiny intervened, because they were in the Motown building, and they so happened to get in the same elevator. They so happened to be in the same elevator with Jermaine Jackson, and he was with his wife Hazel. And they pretty much gave him a cassette, and they only had one cassette left, so they gave Jermaine Jackson their last cassette, and Jermaine actually listened to it. He ended up calling them the next day and said that, look, you guys are amazing, you guys are great. And also word got to Berry Gordy, but Berry Gordy wanted to sign them, but he wanted a showcase. So at the time, I think they was working with another singer, and the reason why Greg was hesitant about Bobby, not that Bobby wasn't great, not that Bobby wasn't amazing, because he knows that Bobby had it, but Bobby had a drug problem, and at this time Bobby was using heroin. So they presented it to Bobby, but told him that he had to get his act together. So he came out to LA clean and sober, and they pretty much did the showcase, and pretty much they lit it up. What they did was that they did their thing by switching instruments, they switched voices, they just gave an all-out performance. And Berry Gordy was just blown away, and he was like, yes. And then Suzanne DePass was like, I've never seen the group do that much switching. And that's where they got their name Switch, because their ability to switch instruments as well as switch voice parts. So in I believe it was in 1977, they did their debut album, and they also did a lot of work they also worked on their debut album with Jermaine Jackson. Jermaine Jackson gave them creative control, so they were able to bring in their own creativity and their own ideas, but he was there to kind of guide them. And their first single was There'll Never Be, which was actually written and led by Bobby DeBarge. A timeless song. I mean, definitely, you can still hear There'll Never Be, and it'll still stop you dead in your tracks to this day. And There'll Never Be went to number 6 on the R&B charts. They also had a ballad, I Want to Be Closer, another one of my favorites. you know, this also was a hit, and the album went number 6 on the R&B charts, and it went platinum. So their first album was a platinum seller. So that definitely, you know, opened a lot of doors for them. They said, Greg said, I think off of the first album, they all got $6,000 apiece, and they all bought cars or whatever. And I think Bobby and Tommy, I think, bought Maseratis, and they said that Tommy kept getting pulled over because he was speeding, and they was like, bruh, just give up the car. So he kind of joked with that yeah, we actually enjoyed our success, and we enjoyed it to the fullest. Then we pretty much, you know, as I said, their first album was platinum. The second album, Switch 2, actually went gold, and they actually had this funky song called Best Beat in Town. It actually went number 16 on the R&B charts, but other funk, you know, artists were kind of clowning them, like, you man, these pretty boys trying to sing funk, what the hell they think they doing? But they were a funk band, and that song was funky, and it definitely had a disco edge. So it definitely struck a chord, but the one that really struck a chord was one of my favorite songs, I Call Your Name, which was a part of my little singing intro of this video. I Call Your Name is just a beautiful track. I mean, I melt every time I hear, you know, Bobby DeBarge's voice on this song. I mean, whew, that song still takes me out. But it went number 10 on the R&B charts, and, you know, it put the album in the top 10, and it was certified gold. Also, we learned in this episode that Bobby DeBarge actually dated LaToya Jackson, and pretty much around this time, you know, pretty much they all started to dabble, you know, in the excess of fame, meaning drugs and alcohol and all of that. And pretty much I think it was Joe who pretty much broke it down and said that this is how the way it went. Philip Ingram was drug free. You know, Joe and Eddie were more like recreational, but Bobby, Greg, and Tommy, it was serious. So they were serious drug users, and it really led to the demise of the group because the drugs really got in the way of their creativity, and it also got in the way of their brotherhood. And pretty much, they also talked about, like, you know, after Bobby DeBarge and LaToya Jackson broke up, it was like at that moment he didn't give a damn no more, and he became more reckless. And they even said that, you know, he had even got like some gay friends, and he would like frequent the gay clubs. And at that time in the 70s, the LGBTQ community was still something that was hidden. It was something that wasn't embraced openly, and to be out and open, you know, with your sexuality at that time did cause a lot of backlash and also a lot of resistance. So Greg kind of had to let him know that he needed to kind of keep it low key, you know, that he just can't be out and open like that because he could destroy his fan base. And that was the reality of that time. I mean, you know, gay people were still being, you know, spat on and still being stomped on, and were still being treated as if like they were a plague upon mankind. And this was going on in the 70s, and Greg was like telling him he kind of had to, you know, pretty much like he needed to play to his audience and kind of keep that part of himself behind closed doors. And it actually created a rift between Greg and Bobby. And their third album was called Reaching for Tomorrow, and around this time, the rest of Bobby and Tommy's siblings, later known as DeBarge, was also signed to Motown as well. And pretty much once DeBarge came, it was kind of beginning. It was kind of like the beginning of the end for Switch in a way. And the reason is because Greg talks about that, once they did the album Reaching for Tomorrow, I think it was called. They had a meeting with Berry Gordy at his house. Berry Gordy listened to one of the songs, and he said that this song is gonna be massive, but you need to change the lyrics. Bobby DeBarge pretty much was like, I ain't changing nothing. So he pretty much told off Berry Gordy up in his house, and from that point on, they were never invited back to Berry Gordy's house, and the actual support that they had from the label began to disintegrate as well. So pretty much that album, Reaching for Tomorrow, went nowhere. And then by the time, and pretty much Greg said from that point on, it was the beginning of the end for Switch. And then they ended up doing the album This Is My Dream, which was their fourth album, and they actually did have a hit off of that album, Love Over and Over Again, which was written by Bobby and Bunny DeBarge, and it went number 9 on the R&B charts. Then after that, they went on tour, and let me say, this tour was a disaster, because all of them, pretty much, Greg, Tommy, and Bobby had drug problems. There were situations where Bobby started taking this cough syrup, and he would literally be gone 3 days out of a week, where he wasn't even there on the tour. He would fly back, I think, to Grand Rapids, and then come back to the tour, and then would make, crazy demands, and would say that, oh no, I'm not performing tonight because I'm a DeBarge, and you don't treat a DeBarge like that. Began to become very, arrogant and big-headed about his place in the group, because and I think it came from, people planting things in his head, letting them know that you don't need them, you're the star of the group, and you're the main talent. And in all actuality, Bobby was one of the most talented ones out of that group, and hands down, that was true. But Bobby at the time, really was so caught up in his own shit that he completely lost focus of his place in the group, because even Philip Ingram was saying that, look, you didn't get signed by yourself. The whole group got signed, so we all played a role in this group. It's not just about you, which is true. When it's a group, it's about the unit. It's not about just one individual. So pretty much the tour was so disastrous that when it came down to it, they ended up owing money, because they lost a lot of money based off of them missing engagements, certain shows when all of them weren't there. When you don't actually deliver, you owe money instead of making money. So they actually owed money, and they didn't make any money off of that tour. And pretty much what ended up happening that by pretty much around this time, I think around '82, Bobby as well as Tommy ended up leaving Switch. Switch tried to keep on, by getting other members to fill those slots, but it still wasn't the same. It wasn't the same Switch. And Greg even said it, they were talented brothers, but they weren't Bobby and they weren't Tommy. It wasn't the actual Switch, so it wasn't the same. And then pretty much, not only did we see that Switch disintegrated, also, Bobby's solo project and, him and Tommy's lives kind of took a nosedive as well because of their drug addiction. And contractual agreements, prevented them from joining DeBarge, their sibling group. So they couldn't join DeBarge. So pretty much, drugs got in the way of Bobby's solo career, and eventually Motown dropped him. In 1988, he was arrested for drug trafficking and got 6 years. and in 1993 he was diagnosed HIV positive, which turned to full-blown AIDS. And sadly, he passed away in 1995 at the age of 39. And I remember when that happened, I was actually 12 at the time, and I remember reading about it in Jet, and I was just completely I was like stuck, and I was like, oh my God. You know, because I knew of them, you know, even at 12 years old, I knew of Switch, because I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm an old soul, so I grew up listening to classic R&B, and even to the point that I knew so much about classic R&B that my mother would ask me questions about music that was popular in her generation. So, let's just say I was special in that way. And you know, when I actually read about it in Jet about Bobby passing, I literally stopped dead in my tracks, and it also made me teary-eyed, you know, when you heard Bunny and Elle talk about him, and they both broke down, you know, because they knew that Bobby was the most talented out of the family, and they really wanted Bobby to succeed, but the problem that Bobby had was that Bobby didn't love himself, and that was his biggest battle. You know, even though people loved him, he had trouble loving himself, and that also kind of led back to some of the demons that all of them had. And also, and I remember, and the good thing about it is that after you know, Bobby passed, and the thing is, he actually had an album, It's Not Over, that was released 2 weeks before he passed. And so, and you know, after he got out of jail, he started to get himself together. He was married and had 2 kids, and he even reached out to Greg and Philip. He rekindled those relationships, and they helped him with his album. And but after Bobby died, you know, the rest of the members of Switch kept busy in the music industry, and they still, you know, had careers in music. And the funny thing about it, I just remembered Philip Ingram had a small role in my best friend's wedding. Towards the end, he was the wedding singer, and he was singing "Say a Little Prayer" by Dionne Warwick, and I just knew I recognized him, and it wasn't until I saw the episode that I saw this episode that I realized, oh my God, that was Philip, because I definitely knew his voice, and I heard him somewhere, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. And it just dawned on me that was Philip Ingram that was singing at the end of the movie when Rupert Everett and Julia Roberts was dancing. So I thought that was pretty cool. And also in 2003 they reformed Switch. They have a new singer, Akili Nixon, who sounds very close to Bobby. So now they're back out there touring, and they're also working on new music. So definitely, we hopefully we get some new stuff from Switch in the future. I definitely look forward to it. But yeah, this was a great episode. It was very eye-opening, and definitely it was definitely done very well. And I for one can say that I was a person that was definitely moved by Switch's music, and even to this day, even me being a singer, it inspires me as well. So that's what I got for you guys. If I left out anything, put it down in the comments. I'd love to talk to you guys about it. But this was a really good episode, and I'm so happy that TV One had finally did a segment on Switch. I'm so happy that they did. But that's what I have, y'all. So subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you can get notifications every time I drop a video. Like this video, share this video, and comment on this video. And I will be back next week with the next episode of Unsung. And I think next week they're doing the dramatics. So definitely stay tuned for that. So until then, everybody, take care.